Yeah. Like some life into this otherwise very not so natural space, right?
You just take a picture of my son.
Good, thank you.
It's not too late to add it to our presentation. What were you saying?
Sure. Oh, they're building,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hope the people stay to give us questions and spur some conversation.
Right. Yeah, and it ends at 10 till anyway, so there's a little bit of time. So. Right, okay. Program chief for this. Yeah.
The next talk does it. Restorative environments.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, I love this archetype.
I know, me too.
So much. Thank you for choosing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Well, that's always the hardest thing. Yeah. It's like trying to figure out like how things work together. And, yeah. 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 It's more up to you. Yeah. the wilderness. Yeah, and which are much closer to it. We have Central Valley. Doesn't count. There's a different kind of wilderness, yeah.
So, on school for a little while.
Sure. Yeah. No, we do emails and yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
with 2 quantitative studies that are investigating the relationship between flow experiences, specific outdoor activities, and pro-environmental attitudes. Then we'll move into exploration of a qualitative study looking at the relationship between wilderness experience and the process of individuation. And we'll wrap up with a discussion of ethical considerations in ecotherapy. I've been asked to convey apologies on behalf of Katrina Richards, who's unable to be here today to talk about mountaineering and self-development. She sends her regrets and wishes that she could be here with us today. So we'll begin this morning with Daniel Benkendorf's research. He is an associate professor of psychology at the Fashion Institute of Technology. His background is in social and organizational psychology, which he's also found a home within environmental psychology and sustainability, and he currently serves as Division 34's treasurer. Please join me in welcoming Daniel Benkendorf.
Thank you. Thank you all for getting up early and joining us this morning to talk a little bit about wellness and wilderness. We really appreciate your time and your attention. And I want to thank my colleagues up here as well, especially Stephanie, for organizing this, and Rosella for being part of this. I hope that this symposium this morning is enlightening for all of you, because we do come from very different backgrounds and perspectives, and I think that is a nice model for addressing any kind of question. And so I'll go ahead and get started with a plug. I am, as Stephanie said, the treasurer for Division 34, so the Society for Environmental Population and Conservation Psychology, and as our past president Beth Carlin likes to say, that's what you get when you have a democracy and you choose a name, a very long name. So that is our name. But if you're not already a member of Division 34, we would like you to become one, or at least entertain the idea of becoming one. If you're interested in people and planet, if you're interested in environmental issues, whether your background is in counseling or clinical or social or industrial organizational or what have you, we'd love to have you be part of our conversation. It's a great group. And if you'd like to get to know us, to make sure that we don't bite, you should come tonight to our social hour. As you see on the slide up here, it's at the Tabletop Tap House, which is right across the street, right across 4th Street from this building. And the activities start at 6 p.m. tonight. We'll have free drinks, and there's a limitation, but I'll leave that up. Say it quietly. But there are drinks provided and food as well, and of course good company. So we hope to see you tonight. All right, so the title of my talk is Love the One You're With, Nature, Flow Experiences, and Pro-Environmental Attitudes. And my name is Daniel Benkendorf, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. And so you might be thinking, well, okay, fashion, New York City, wilderness? What kind of wilderness is he talking about? So I'm interested in wilderness, partly because of where I am and the kinds of things that we experience in an urban environment. And it's an interesting place to be too at FIT with such a focus on materials, right? And one thing that I have been really surprised and thrilled by in my position at FIT is the commitment among the faculty and the students to sustainability, to trying to clean up what is really the second dirtiest industry on the planet, the fashion industry. So that's kind of my angle and why I'm interested in this. And my background is in industrial and organizational psychology, and my advisor as a doctoral student was a social psychologist, is a social psychologist. And so I think of myself as kind of eclectic in my interest and my training. So I thought in terms of my title, I would choose something, I like to try to be clever, I don't know how clever it is, but to kind of harken back to some of the cultural significance of the city where we're meeting in San Francisco, with a song title that you may be familiar with, Stephen Stills' song, Love the One You're With. But of course I'm not talking about human intimacy here between humans. I'm talking about intimacy between humans and the earth, humans and to subjective improvements in subjective well-being, how they influence subjective well-being, and also how they inform and kind of influence our environmental attitudes. So with that, I'll start with just a brief description of flow. Probably many of you know what this is, but if you don't, this is a concept that's been around for about 30 years. Mihai is responsible for coining the term and for the idea here. But the concept is that we're going to be looking at perceived opportunities for action and perceived skills. And when you experience the right balance between perceived opportunities for action and perceived skills, then you are experiencing a state that he calls the flow state. And as you can see here from this graphic, flow can be viewed on this graphic as kind of situated between arousal and control, where you have high skills and high challenges, but that your challenges aren't so high that you're overwhelmed, and your skills aren't so high that you're bored, right? So that's kind of where we are. And there are many different activities that could potentially lead to a flow state. So some people other researchers have studied this for years and have identified all kinds of things that lead to the flow state. And it's also been looked at in the field of positive psychology pretty deeply in looking at specifically how it relates to the umbrella concept of subjective well-being. So the characteristics of the flow state, so Mihai identified 8 characteristics of flow. The first is intense and focused concentration on what one is doing in the present moment. Second is this merging of action and awareness. So that one experiences almost a lack of daydreaming, I guess you could say, or mind wandering. There's control over action, so one feels in control, that you can deal with the situation because you know how to respond no matter what's going to happen next. The sense of time shifts such that time either feels like it's standing still or that time feels like it's passing very, very quickly. But we're not really, our sense of time changes in a flow state. It's intrinsically rewarding. There's an effortlessness about it. And there's a balance between challenge and skill, as I've already mentioned. And there's a real clarity of goals and immediate feedback when experiencing flow. So measuring flow has been one, I think, objective of researchers trying to develop measures for flow. And one that has received some support, a great deal of support actually, is Jackson and Marsh's from 1996, the flow state scale. This is a 36-item scale that I used in my research. It's a 5-point Likert type response scale, and I just provided a few sample items up here to show you how this self-report scale gets at those 8 characteristics that I just outlined. So you can see, like, for example, the way that time passed seemed to be different from normal. That would be the transformation of time, for example. So I was interested in what outdoor activities most reliably lead to the flow state, and also what outdoor activities are most related to pro-environmental attitudes. And so I began by recruiting potential participants, and this was really, so far, has been the most difficult part of this research experience, or research endeavor for me. And so identifying people who are active, what I call outdoor enthusiasts, people who participate in the activities that I was interested in, these outdoor activities, a lot and are pretty good at them. And after I identified them and screened them, I gave them the 120 items. There's actually a few different versions of this. There's a shorter form scale of 72 items and then an even briefer one that's only 24 items. But I wanted to give my participants the long form, so they completed the 120 item scale, called the Environmental Attitudes Inventory, which is one of many measures that have been developed to measure environmental attitude. state scale. But they completed this. They were, part of what they agreed to do for me is they, after they participated in whatever of the chosen activities, and I'll show you which activities I was looking at in just a moment, after they participated in the activity, I asked them to complete the flow state scale within 12 hours of the activity. And so I have it on their, on the honor system that they agreed to do that. And so they completed the FSS. And then they wrote a 500-word journal. I haven't looked at those yet, but I'm interested to do so, to kind of look through the journal entries and see what people wrote. But they did that within 24 hours of the activity. And then they also completed a demographics questionnaire for me. So what were the activities? Here they are. Scuba diving, whitewater rafting, rappelling, sailing, depending on where you live. You might call it one or other of those things. If you're in the US, rappelling. Scuba diving, surfing, cycling, fishing, kayaking, running, and hiking. So I wanted to look at, kind of, this was a difficult task too, a difficult choice to make of how many, kind of balancing how many activities to look at, so that I wasn't overwhelmed about which activities to focus on. And so just some very preliminary results here. You can see here are some descriptive statistics. On the left, you see outdoor activities and EAI scores, that's the environmental attitudes inventory scores with means and standard deviations, and then on the right, outdoor activities and flow state scores. And so I have them organized here by mean. So if you look on the right for the environmental attitude inventory, the hikers scored highest of these 10 activities, and the fishers, or fishermen, fisher people, fisher women, scored the lowest. And if you look at the flow state scores, surfing of all these activities seem to be the most, generate the most flow, or be most likely to generate flow state. And these are, of course, just descriptives. And then nature-based flow, EAI scores, and time spent outdoors. I also, as part of my, part of the questionnaire, asked them how much time they spent outdoors. And so they were instructed to give me an estimate of how much time they spent outdoors in recreation activities per month. And so that's what that was. And then nature-based flow experiences were self-reported. The respondents estimated how many separate occasions in the past year they experienced flow while participating in their preferred outdoor activities. And so there you have the means and standard deviations. And then the relationships here. I looked at the relationship between nature-based flow, that self-report question, and environmental attitudes, scores, and time spent outdoors. And I found significant positive correlations here, some more impressive than others. But I guess the bottom line is that the environmental attitudes were positively correlated with flow, and time spent outdoors was positively correlated with nature-based flow as well, which I think is quite intuitive, right? And then the environmental attitudes were also correlated with time spent outdoors. So far, many outdoor activities, I would say, are, I guess, possible avenues to the experience of flow, and that spending more time outside is related to nature-based flow. And I would also say that pro-environmental attitudes are related to nature-based flow experiences, but there's a lot more work to be done. And so next steps for me will be to explore the potential causal links between flow experiences and environmental attitudes. I'm also interested in what other features of outdoor activities influence environmental attitudes, and there's also, there's already some work, some good work on this. And I'd like to look at more activities to see what other outdoor activities and look at other features of outdoor activities aside from whether or not they are related to flow. And does it have to be outdoors? So there's a lot of work now looking at virtual reality and experiences with virtual reality. Can they lead to the flow state? Can they lead to enhanced pro-environmental values if they're designed to do so? Those are interesting questions that I'm interested in pursuing. So I think I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm going to pass the baton here to Stephanie.
which includes Waterton and Glacier National Parks, as well as the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex. I've been doing that since 2006. And I've also engaged in wilderness therapy with at-risk adolescents in Montana for several years. I previously served as the managing editor of the Psychology journal, and this research today comes directly out of my dissertation, which I completed in February. So we're probably all by now familiar with the perception of separation from nature, which plagues the Western world. And that this separation, or this perception of separation from nature, is a root cause of the ills that plague our times and planet. From personal meaninglessness and lack of purpose, to social and cultural disconnection, to the ecological crises that threaten our very existence. Yesterday, Art Bloom and Joseph Gahn gave wonderful presentations about this worldview and the perception of separation from nature, so we had the opportunity to see those. This perceived separation led Thomas Berry to suggest that while we know more about the universe now through science, our intimate presence to it is really lacking, more than at any other time in human history. So while there have been a number of excellent studies which have examined the impacts of wilderness experience on a variety of constructs, from self-development all the way to clinical treatment, this study sought to do something a little different. I was looking for the kinds of experiences that might break through that worldview of perception of separation from nature, and identify the kinds of experiences which might transform an individual's worldview and a perception that we might be part of nature. Toward those ends, Jungian theory and Jung's concept of individuation was of particular interest. Jung himself wrote of psychological splits and disconnections endemic in the Western world, as well as the profound transformation of the worldview necessary to recognizing psyche's embeddedness in nature. Jung suggested that individuation, which represents the process by which a person becomes psychologically whole, could heal this perceived split between psyche and nature. He also argued that an experience of complete individuation would be a conscious experience of the totality of nature, dissolving the perceived boundaries between psyche and matter, self and nature. So the question becomes, how do we individuate? Jung here posited an answer, although he didn't empirically study this, when he suggested that individuation may be initiated by numinous experience, an encounter with some powerful force beyond the self, which sweeps the ego clean of its old ways and ushers in something new. Jung was such a strong believer in the power of numinous experience that he called it the real therapy, and said that it has the potential to release us from the curse of pathology. If this holds true, then numinous experiences in wilderness might have the potential to release an individual from the pathology of perceiving oneself as separate from the whole of nature. But that's pretty difficult to test empirically. So instead, with few studies in this particular area, I sought to start at the beginning, to ask people what numinous encounters in wilderness might be like, how they might impact the courses of life, and what kind of changes might develop between self and nature as the result of such an experience. This study utilized qualitative inquiry because it provides research methods which are naturalistic, holistic, and most importantly, inductive. Phenomenology was selected as the specific methodology because it seeks essences of phenomena by focusing on participants' lived experiences and the meanings they ascribe to them. Phenomenology follows a specific sequence of steps, whereby the researcher identifies predispositions to the topic and brackets the list to avoid assumptions, gathers data from participants in open-ended ways, and then analyzes that data by coding statements into meaning units, which are clustered into structural and textual themes, from which the essences of the phenomenon are distilled. Phenomenology does have an inherent limitation on generalizability, in that rich, detailed findings can be generated from data, but not applied to others without further testing. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Recruitment occurred from a population of wilderness guides, who were believed to have more experience with nature than most of us, and who self-selected to participate based on having had a powerful, lasting experience in wilderness or wild nature. That was the extent of the description that was given to them. Data were gathered through semi-structured interviews lasting between 60 and 120 minutes. Each interview began with an induction, followed by a prompt to describe their encounter. study. Most of them were in the second half of their lives. Half were female, half male, and all were Caucasian. So another limited generalizability here, which we kind of need in the study. As you can see, participants were experienced guides with an average of 15 years, and they tended to spend a lot of time in wild nature. Analyses of the interview data generated structural themes based on what participants experienced, as well as meaning-based themes based on how participants made sense of their experiences. So the first structural theme was wild landscapes. Not surprisingly, participants were asked what kinds of experiences they had, and they said, well, I had an experience in a place that felt wild to me. All participants provided vivid descriptions of the landscapes in which their numinous encounters had occurred, and they were all in places that were mostly undisturbed by human impact. These most profound encounters did not find them in houses, businesses, gardens, urban spaces, and urban parks, with participants offering that they needed to be where nature was speaking and people weren't drowning out in order to have had the kinds of experiences that they had. This is important because it suggests that this kind of experience needs to happen in places that are more open and less human dominated, which makes it imperative that we preserve our wild landscapes and do what we can to protect them. Pat Winter yesterday talked about our disappearing open spaces at the rate of about 6,000 acres a day. So that's pretty concerning given that these kinds of experiences might best take place in these kinds of settings. All participants reported that their experiences were accompanied by strong emotions, the most overwhelming of which was surprise. They said that they were going into wilderness settings to recreate and to do fun things. They were not expecting to have a profound, moving, transformative experience. So they were surprised by that. Other strong emotions included aliveness, vitality, awe, fear, and love. Many reported that going into their experience, they had been troubled by something, maybe feeling hopeless or despair, maybe some anger, and that the numinous encounter that they had ushered in feelings of healing, forgiveness, and hope. And interestingly, they reported that those feelings have remained accessible to them after their experiences, and in some cases have protected them from getting trapped in previous emotional patterns, having this touchstone to refer back to. This is important because traditional Western medicines, therapies, and even some spiritual practices have targeted these same kinds of shifts, sometimes with great expense and potential side effects, whereas these numerous experiences in wilderness tend to have long-lasting, powerful effects without some of those other potential detriments. A third structural theme involved an alteration of consciousness, where participants described a profound shift in consciousness during their encounters. And that consciousness involved a perception of a blending of boundaries, being in the conscious and unconscious world at the same time, somewhere between waking and sleeping. Others described it as a dissolution of the boundaries between self and other, personal and collective. And one even said that it felt like moving through the energetic signature of life. This implies that human connection with nature's consciousness may be most accessible through physical presence to intact nature, where those presences of nature allow this kind of shift of consciousness. It also suggests that this kind of break in worldview may not be accessible to us in our daily conscious lives. Moving now into the themes relating to meaning that participants ascribed to their experiences. The first was the idea of revelation. All participants reported that their encounter in wilderness felt like some form of revelation, something being revealed to them, primarily focusing on a consciousness of interconnected nature. So here we have that first breakthrough in worldview. They talked about feeling the sacred conversation that's always happening, the land's dream, being communicated with by animal, image, ancestor, and cosmos. Within these revelations were also senses of purpose, revealing that participants had some sort of unique human role or responsibility, with one participant saying, what was revealed to me was the work the earth gave me to do. But these participants did suggest that they felt that there was an intentional consciousness that was being communicated to them in this revelation. experience and initiation, representing a second theme here. They described their experiences as a landmark kind of thing, as pivotal points around which the rest of their lives have been arranged, a soul initiation moment, a deeply initiatory journey. They also felt that they could not go back after this kind of initiation to the ways that they had been living before. That to walk me through a threshold of my life where I couldn't go back. And that they were being initiated to a kind of feeling of the differentiated parts and interconnections of it all. Initiated to a different worldview, a different kind of perception. Here we begin to see evidence of the kind of individuation that Jung was talking about, because we're starting to see an integration of the self with nature. A third theme revolved around transformation and rebirth, with participants saying that their encounters resulted in personal transformation and lasting change, such as deeper connection with the natural world. I realized that I'm a part of nature and always in nature. Altered worldviews, such as I was cracked open to see to the non-human side of my existence. They also reported changes in lifestyles, vocational paths, improved physical and psychological health, greater interpersonal acuity, increased courage to live authentically, and freedom from fear of death. There were so many transformations that one participant referred to her experience as psychospiritual CPR, and another said that her experience had saved her life. And this may reflect a rebirth to that individuating life that Jung wrote of, and demonstrates that Jung was onto something significant when he said that numinous experience was real therapy, with the potential to release us from many of the pathologies of our lives. The final theme related to meaning involved purpose and life imperatives, where all participants reported some sort of sense of purpose and some sort of imperative with which to live their lives going forward after their experiences. According to this sample, this kind of experience is a birthright, and one that the one participant would want so many more people to have that she became a wilderness guide herself to bring people to these kinds of experiences. Another said that she felt that her purpose then was to learn to take care of those wounded in our places as well as in our psyches, and she's founded a nonprofit organization to do just that. Another participant said that she felt that wilderness is medicine, and her life's imperative, her directive going forward is to follow that medicine and lead others to it as well. That's why she became a wilderness guide. So returning then to the relationship between numinous wilderness experiences and Jung's individuation process. For participants in this study, it would seem that wholeness arose from numinous encounters in the wilderness, the effects of which did eviscerate the perceived split between psyche and nature. This supports the idea that the nature-based numinous encounter may reflect a significant experience in the individuation process, perhaps because it serves as initiation to an embodied experience of the totality of nature, as Jung posited, and becomes the real therapy to release us from those curses of pathology. In writing about this, Jung suggested that the descent into the depths will bring healing, but this study suggests that the descent to a wilderness can bring healing as well. Therefore, the place of total being, the place of healing and redemption, of which Jung wrote, may be wilderness, where all the split off parts of the world are united, including the universality within itself and its larger context within the natural world. However, more research is needed before we can draw such lofty conclusions. The science of psychological research may wish to investigate nature-based transformative experiences further and further delineate what's actually happening there. And clinicians might consider drawing from numinous experiences to assist their clients with meaningful change. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to turn things over to Evelyn Friedheim. Evelyn is a graduate student in the Psychology program at the Wright Institute at Berkeley. She is currently recruiting clinicians, ecotherapists, for her dissertation work, and she'll talk more about that in a moment. She was recently certified as an ecotherapist, and Evelyn is from Hawaii with an intention to return there someday, and is grateful and committed to our Earth, our planet, and intends to keep that very close at hand.
study exploring how licensed psychologists who are ecotherapy practitioners think about and manage the key, unique ethical scenarios of working with clients in nature. I hope to engage at the end of our panel in a collaborative dialogue to further expand and understand the conditions necessary for the preservation of human well-being while pursuing the psychological benefits of wilderness experience, as we heard so beautifully through those narratives. The four consistent themes that emerged in the literature are clinicians' competence to provide ecotherapy, the pre-treatment considerations, including consent to treatment, the impact of expanding the therapeutic frame, including confidentiality, and finally, ensuring the safety of the client and the clinician. For each ethical domain, I will outline the relevant APA code of ethics that may need to be renegotiated due to bringing the client into the wilderness. And I have a handout available with the references for my literature review of different clinicians working with clients in the outdoors who have begun to pave the way by publishing their individual ethical solutions. And again, I really hope that my dissertation and our talk can help to support these ethical best practices of ecotherapy becoming evidence-based. First, under the heading Clinicians' Competence to Provide Ecotherapy Services, ethical domains are outlined here in Table 1. So starting with competence, it's important for eco-psychologists to be fully transparent with their clients about their prior training to doing ecotherapy, the scope and any limitations of their practice in this area, and to advertise their competence adequately. Education and training. While there has been a limited focus in traditional psychology curriculums on conducting ecotherapy, there are now certification programs offered to clinicians in ecotherapy as well as additional coursework in this area. Furthermore, being part of our Division 34 of APA and staying current on articles published in the Ecopsychology Journal offers support and guidance for clinicians doing this work. One unique area of training that is necessary for ecopsychologists to get in conducting therapy outdoors is in preparing for medical emergencies. Respectful integration. Something I'm not able to address as thoroughly as it deserves is respectful integration. Ecopsychologists are on the forefront of bridging indigenous healing practices with psychology. We want to be really careful about not appropriating, being sensitive about how and if particular methods are integrated and if they're integrated. And another important part is the expectation to protect the natural environment when using it in the therapeutic process. Second, the ethical considerations that must be made before ecotherapy treatment begins are outlined in Table 2. Informed consent. Given the new nature of this modality, a comprehensive informed consent form needs to be reviewed and signed that clearly discloses what the treatment offers, what the limitations are, and that there are alternative modalities to ensure that ecotherapy is the preferred model of treatment. Screening. Appropriate screening measures have not yet fully been established. A full discussion with the client about prior sensitivities or traumas they may have experienced in natural settings, their physical abilities, their ego strength, attachment styles, and the nature of their transference must be fully explored and discussed prior to reviewing the specific informed consent about bringing your clients outside. Not to push a nature agenda. It's important that we don't push a nature agenda with clients, but give them the full opportunity to understand the risks and benefits of both traditional therapy and ecotherapy approaches so that they can make an informed choice to this treatment for themselves. Payment. Another aspect of informed consent is letting the client know that the duration is often longer in ecotherapy, typically between 90 minutes to 2 hours. So there could be an increase in fee, and also there's some other costs to having the safety equipment, some just things to be transparent about with your clients. And finally, reciprocity. Many ecotherapists believe that giving back to nature is an important part of their ethical responsibility, which includes honoring the intrinsic value of nature and the therapeutic triad, not just the utilitarian value of nature. All of these aspects must be embedded in the informed consent to ensure that the client fully understands the nature of the treatment and their responsibilities within it. treatment dovetails with the third ethical area involving expanding the treatment frame, which is outlined in Table 1. The differences in the therapeutic relationship of ecotherapy outdoors should be made explicit. For example, clients could be aware that when outside the consulting room, there may be less eye contact with the therapist than traditional. Confidentiality. If the client is appropriate and interested, an extended conversation needs to then be taken place about confidentiality. The nature of doing therapy outside involves therapy in a public space, so possible challenges need to be anticipated and solutions worked out collaboratively with the client. Some of these issues could be running into a familiar person with the client for the client or the therapist, and also disclosing sensitive materials in public spaces. So just something we want to anticipate with our clients in advance. Also accessibility, there's a misconception that ecotherapy excludes persons with disabilities, and there is a growing awareness within our field, and lots of great solutions to finding equal access. And finally, treatment planning. Clinicians should be careful to consider how different environments affect the client and continue to be intentional in the treatment planning. And finally, safety. The final area is safety. This is a psychologist's responsibility to protect the clients from harm. Given that therapy is taking place outside in a public space, it's up to the psychologist to select spaces for ecotherapy that are safer, involving more stable terrain, more protection from sudden changes in weather, that are accessible to emergency services should that be necessary, and that also offers some privacy and protection for the client's confidentiality. Again, this can be worked out in collaboration with the client to find spaces that maximize the safety, both psychologically and physically. And also, it can be helpful for the therapist to bring a well-stocked backpack with a first aid kit and a cell phone in case of emergency. And finally, documentation. Because of the additional risks, clinicians should be judicious with their documentation of both preliminary conversations and the ongoing conversations that they have throughout treatment. So in closing, I hope that this presentation has stimulated some ideas in the audience about the complexities of doing this work and offers some preliminary ethical solutions to ensure adherence to our APA Code of Ethics. I invite all of the clinical expertise in this room here today to engage in a collaborative dialogue, and please stay in communication with me to further consider the ethical best practices and conditions necessary for the preservation of human well-being while pursuing the psychological benefits of wilderness experience that our previous presenters really just beautifully outlined for us. So yeah, I really would love some feedback on my research questions and really anything that has to do with ethics and ecotherapy.
So we have about 8 minutes to open up our panel to questions. You have a question for us?
When did we go from wilderness to ecotherapy? And is ecotherapy, by definition, then a paradigm that requires psychologists to be present or licensed therapists to be present? I kind of lost that bit.
Sure, so the question is, when did we go from wilderness to ecotherapy? And what does that involve? Who's doing that? And what does that involve? So I'm going to open up that question to our certified ecotherapist, who is probably our best expert on the panel to answer that.
So yeah, what brings us all together is, I think, the intention to offer clients the resource and the benefit of nature. And depending on the specific needs of the participant within this wilderness process really dictates what kind of a practitioner needs to be present. So if the client has more mental health sensitivities, they may require a psychologist or a master's level clinician, or it does not need to be a psychologist, no, a master's level clinician. But the benefit of pursuing certification is really something that is important.